Today we're looking at Thomas Nast and American political cartoons. Hello, welcome to the Daily Bellringer. Please don't forget to subscribe and take a look at the questions down in the description. Political cartoons have a long history in American culture, as cartoons have become an easily understood method of conveying ideas and commentaries or opinions about what is going on in our government or society. Many historians argue that Benjamin Franklin was responsible for the first political cartoon in American history in 1754 with his join or die snake illustration, attempting to convince the American colonies that they needed to join together under his Albany Plan of Union as the French and Indian War was beginning, otherwise the colonies might die. But one could argue that political cartoons in America did not come into their own until the mid to late 1800s, with the illustrations of Thomas Nast, who some call the father of American cartoon. Nast was born in Landau, Germany on September 27, 1840, and by the age of 6, his family had immigrated to America, moving to New York City. Nast attended school in New York until he was 14 years old, but he was not very good at being a student. As far as, being interested in math or history or anything, he was far more interested in drawing. And by 1856, he started working for Frank Leslie's illustrated newspaper as an illustrator, and then 3 years later, he had his first illustration published by Harper's Weekly, which was one of the most read weekly newspapers in the nation. By 1860, he was working for the New York Illustrated News, and just before the American Civil War began, he traveled to Europe to create illustrations about many stories there. And by the time the first shots of the Civil War occurred at Fort Sumter in April of 1861, Nast was back in New York City, and shortly after, in September of 1861, he married Sarah Edwards, whom he had been courting for a few years, and together they would have 5 children. As the Civil War began to grow in its magnitude, the demand for reports and visual representations of the battlefields grew. And since photography was still somewhat in its infancy, the need for skilled illustrators to travel with the armies was high. Nast joined the staff of Harper's Weekly in 1862 and immediately began to get notoriety for his detailed scenes of battle and camp life of the typical soldier. Nast was a Republican and very critical of the institution of slavery and the South, and many of his drawings expressed those ideas. Nast used his cartoons to help campaign for Abraham Lincoln in 1864 and later for Ulysses S. Grant when he ran for president. As the Civil War came to an end in 1865, some of Nast's most famous cartoons were focused on Reconstruction politics. And in fact, Nast was responsible for the creating of the elephant symbol for the Republican Party and the donkey to represent the Democratic Party, which are still the symbols used to this day. Most of Nast's cartoons were against racial segregation, they were favorable of abolition of slavery, and many attacked new racist institutions such as the Ku Klux Klan. Although many of his illustrations displayed these ideas, some were very critical of Irish immigrants and very anti-Catholic Church. Arguably one of Nast's most famous editorial cartoons was his series of illustrations that were critical of New York State Senator William Boss Tweed's political machine in New York City. Tweed and his associates basically stole millions of dollars from the city of New York by inflating the prices and payouts to contractors doing jobs for the city. Nast drew several cartoons criticizing and exposing the corruption in New York City, and Tweed actually offered Nast a $100,000 bribe to stop drawing the cartoons, which Nast then negotiated up to $500,000 before refusing to take the bribe. Tweed was voted out of office in 1871 and then fled to Cuba to avoid arrest, but interestingly, officials in Cuba were able to identify Tweed based on Nast cartoons. By the 1880s, Nast had developed differences with many Republican politicians and actually supported several Democrats such as Winfield Scott Hancock and Grover Cleveland for president. But then by the early 1890s, he had split with Harper's Weekly and started his own paper called Nast Weekly, which he now used to support Republican candidates such as Benjamin Harrison. Nast's paper ended up failing, leaving him financially ruined. He attempted to get several different jobs but was unsuccessful until President Theodore Roosevelt, who had been a big fan of his cartoons, appointed Nast to Consul General for the United States in Ecuador. A consul is someone that is a representative of a nation in a foreign country and makes sure citizens of their home nation are protected in that country. In July of 1902, Nast moved to Ecuador, where soon after a yellow fever outbreak occurred. Nast contracted yellow fever and died on December 7th of 1902 in Ecuador at the age of 62. Nast and his illustrations had a huge impact on American political history, but also on popular culture. Nast is responsible for the modern depictions of Santa Claus based on his drawings, as well as our image of Uncle Sam. In a time before television or internet, Nast used visual media to express ideas and communicate political ideologies to the American people in a way never before seen. So with that, hopefully you learned something, and thanks for watching.